The dilemma that Robert Bayer spoke of is another reason why Section 702 is such a hot topic on Capitol Hill and in Washington now, and such an urgently needed tool that the intelligence community is hopeful will be reauthorized. Now, back to our conversation with Rachel Brand, Associate Attorney General at the Department of Justice. Well, it is my understanding that it needs to be reauthorized, and Congress is responsible for the reauthorization. And there are some very intelligent people in Congress. And I'm wondering why it is, based on what it is you've explained to me, that there is this risk of it expiring in the first place.
Well, I am hopeful that we will get an authorization by the end of the year. The House Intelligence Committee, chaired by Mr. Nunes, just marked up a bill just now, and we're taking a look at the details of it, but we think that'll be a good vehicle, and we're hopeful that that will get done by the end of the year. We've really spent a lot of time, and I personally have spent a lot of time up on the Hill meeting with individual members of Congress and talking through with them, the value of the program, how it works, addressing any concerns that they might have. So I'm hopeful that we'll get to the place that we need to be, but we're certainly spending all the time that we need to get there.
Yeah, again, though, why are you having to go? Is that just protocol that you're doing this, or is this you're actually having to explain to folks, okay, this is what this is, like you're doing with us, this is what this does, this is why it's important? Is that what you're having to do, or is there another matter? Is there some other resistance to this?
Well, there have been some privacy concerns raised about Section 702. Those began to be raised after Mr. Snowden leaked details about the program back, 3 years ago now?
2013.
Yeah, and, there was a lot of misunderstanding at the time about what Section 702 was, and it was often confused with the Section 215 bulk telephony metadata program, which was in fact a bulk program, and 702 is very different from that. But because the programs were leaked around the same time, they were often confused. They were certainly confused in the press. Reporting would often conflate the two, and I think some members of Congress have also kind of lump them together in their mind. Now, I spent almost 5 years on the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board. My term there just ended in February, and after the Snowden leaks, President Obama asked us to do an in-depth investigation of Section 702, which we did. And remember, the P Club is 5 members, Senate-confirmed members, ranging from conservative Republicans to liberal Democrats at that time, and we took a very in-depth look at 702, spent lots of time up at Fort Meade with all the classified details, and unanimously concluded that the program was legal and highly effective and is in fact a targeted program. Now, we did recommend a number of tweaks to the program to ameliorate potential privacy impacts. If, for example, a targeted terrorist abroad emails a U.S. person, that email would be collected, and there are rules around the program that help ameliorate the privacy impacts of that. We recommended some changes, and the government made all of those changes in whole or part. So we think that the rules that govern 702 are already very protective of privacy, and those are some of the conversations that we're having with members of Congress.
What's your feeling about whether this will get done? I heard what you said a few moments ago about you've been working on this and you're hopeful, but what's your feeling about where it stands right now?
Well, with the markup in the House Intelligence Committee, I feel better. I think that that's a vehicle that may work out well. I guess we'll see. I mean, how these things play out on the floor of the House and Senate, and then potentially in conference, those are ledge strategy questions that might be above my pay grade. But I feel okay about the status right now. But certainly, we're going to keep doing everything we can to impress upon Congress how important it is to get this done before the end of the year.
On the off chance, or even a greater chance, that this doesn't, for some reason, get done by the end of the year, and it does expire, what does that mean? What essentially happens at that point?
Well, at that point, we would have to start winding the program down, and we would very soon thereafter start losing valuable intelligence. We start becoming blind to some of the intelligence that we can gather now. And there is just no... At the moment, there is just no legal authority that is an adequate substitute for this authority, so it would be extremely damaging.
What message would that send to bad actors?
Well, that's a really good question. It's hard to get inside the mind of those folks. I mean, I think it could embolden them. I mean, but you know, that's anyone's guess. I certainly know that on our end of it, we would be very concerned about not knowing what we don't know. You know, what are we blind to now? What can we not see? What can we not hear?
Give us a sense of what you think the importance of this element is, given what the world has just gone through since June of 2013 with the Daesh group, and now with what I'm told is the resurgence of Al-Qaeda and other groups and other actors out there, and certainly, you know, not just relegated to terrorism. You've got other actors out there as well, nation states too. So give us a sense of just how important a time period, how pivotal the moment that we're in right now is.
Well, boy, that's a big question. I mean, I think you don't, look, I am not sitting in the center of the national security apparatus in the government right now, so I probably don't have the best bird's eye view for all of that, but I think if you just look at the newspaper every day, the threats are multifaceted. You've got WMD threats, terrorist threats, you've got, espionage threats. There's a very complicated diplomatic, environment all around the world, and those are all reasons why we need good intelligence and why we need this tool.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, for the layperson, you have to obviously treat the people that you're briefing on the Hill and everywhere else you go essentially the same way, give them a certain amount of respect for what their position is. But as you mentioned, this is a very complicated issue. So I'm very curious as to how you start this conversation with them. Give us a little sketch of what you do when you begin this conversation with those folks.
Well, I can't give you one sketch because it depends on where the person's coming from, right? I mean, some people understand the program very well and may have specific questions. Others have no idea what it is. They might think it's the 215 program, and others are, some are hostile and that may come from some of them may come from a place of educated understanding of the program, or it may come from a place of misunderstanding, and so it depends on the member. And so I usually ask, how do you want me to start? Should I start by explaining the program, or should I start with a specific concern? And so these conversations have been good, and I think even with members who are sort of reflexively hostile at the beginning of the conversation, I think by the end, at least they're listening. I think hopefully they at least have a better understanding of the program, and I'm hopeful that we've changed some minds and that the votes here will go the way we need them to go.
I'm still at a little bit of a loss as to why 29 days before the end of the year we're at this point. As critical as this is.
If you look back, and I don't mean to minimize the urgency, because we have a real sense of urgency of getting this thing reauthorized before the end of the year. But if you look back every few years since the Patriot Act was first enacted in 2001, there have been sunsets. And every time it comes down to the wire. That is, I think, the nature of the legislative process. And so I don't think you should interpret this timing to mean that 702 is any more concerning than any previous program, but it unfortunately is the nature of it. But we can't risk expiration, and so we are really pushing to get this done as soon as we possibly can.
Does the version of what you're pushing now give you any better tools or greater opportunities? Does it improve your abilities?
I think the answer is no, although we're still looking at the version that the various bills that are pending in Congress, and this is kind of a shifting target. We're really focused on preserving the tool and preserving it in a way that doesn't have amendments that diminish its effectiveness. There have been a lot of well-intentioned amendments that are intended to protect privacy, but that have really significant operational impacts that would really diminish the effectiveness. So we're really focused on getting the bill reauthorized without those kinds of amendments. So this is not a situation where we're looking for enhanced authorities. We're intent on preserving this authority.
How much of your day is spent on this issue?
Quite a bit lately, and let me just tell you, as Associate AG, national security issues are not really in my bailiwick, right? I'm focused on the civil litigation of the department and lots of other things. But because of my background with 702 from my time on the P Club, the AG asked me to spearhead our reauthorization effort, and I have spent a lot of time on this. I will drop just about everything else to go up to the Hill, talk to a member, to talk to the Bureau about their concerns about a provision, to talk to the press, to do whatever we need to do to get it done, because it is by far our top national security priority on the Hill this year. So this is an everyday thing for me.
Frustration sometimes?
No, because I've spent enough time with these issues. Like in the Bush administration, I headed the legal policy division here at DOJ and spent a lot of time on FISA issues very similar to this. Spent almost 5 years on the P Club. I've had these kinds of conversations now for years, and so I'm beyond a place of being frustrated when someone else doesn't understand the rules, and I think it's my job to help them understand how the program really works and try to answer their questions and assuage their concerns. So no, I relish it. I enjoy these conversations, even with folks that are hostile. I think it's important for us to have these conversations and try to find common ground with folks.
All right. Last thing, how would a warrant requirement impact 702 or the ability to use it?
Well, one of the proposals that have been floated in some of the bills is to require the FBI to have a warrant before it can do a query of the information that has already been lawfully collected under Section 702. A query is just a technical term for the FBI doing a quick search of the information it already has in its database. The reason that a warrant requirement would be problematic is if you think about it, a query is done at a very early stage of the investigation. Say the FBI gets a tip from somebody at a truck rental counter that the person about to rent the truck is acting suspicious, and they think, I'm going to see something, say something, call it in. The FBI has no idea at that point if it's a real thing, if it's just got some sketchy guy at the truck rental counter. They don't know what it is. And so one of the first things they're going to do is do a quick query. And if there happens to be a hit on the 702 information in their database, and it shows that this person's in contact with ISIS and they're renting a truck now in Manhattan, that could be a really important thing to know. If you put a warrant requirement in, the FBI agent will not do the query because they don't have probable cause at that point. They could never get a judge to give them a warrant under those circumstances. And so it would be back to pre-9/11 information sharing barriers that the 9/11 Commission told us contributed to our failure to locate a couple of the hijackers before. So we don't want to go back to those well-intentioned but really operationally problematic rules that we had pre-9/11. We want the FBI to be able to connect the dots right away during a potentially fast-moving investigation.
Rachel Brand, Associate Attorney General at the Justice Department, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
That interview took place on December 1st, 2017. 10 days later, Akayed Ullah tried to blow himself and others up in a tunnel under the New York Port Authority. There are reports he may have had contact with radical elements in his native Bangladesh. It's not clear, and we may not know for a long time, if ever, if Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act played any role in helping authorities determine who his contacts were. But the incident shines a bright light on DOJ's interest in the reauthorization of Section 702.